Hello, welcome to Recitation 9. This recitation is mainly about JavaScript loops and arrays. And in this recitation, we will give a brief introduction to JavaScript programs that involve loops and arrays. And before the recitation, you also need to log into Canvas, click the Files button, then go into the folder called Recitation Information. Then click into the folder called Recitation Files. Then download the file called Recitation 9 Array Basics Initial.html. Okay, cool. Then you should also open the folder which contains your downloaded initial file as your working space, and then click the initial file to open the file. Okay. Now we will have the line 35 to line 42. In this segment of code, we have two methods to create two arrays. The first array is called names and second array is called books. So for first array, which is called names, the method of creating this array is first we have var, which is keyword, and then we have the variable name, and then we have a new array as the function to just create the array. Then, because the array has 10 elements, we need to do the initialization. We write all the elements of the arrays one by one in order. This is the first method of creating an array. And also we have the second method, which is just write the length of the array, or called the size of the array into the brackets. So we have the variable, then the name of the array as books, and we have new array, and we write a pair of brackets, and we just write the length or the size of the array as 10, which means that our array has 10 elements in total. Different from the first method, when we just create this array which contains 10 elements, we don't know what is the actual value of these 10 elements within this books array. So now we need to just assign the value of each element to these elements, right? Now we have the loop structure to write the value into the arrays one by one. The reason why we need this loop structure is that sometimes our size of the array will be small. For example, sometimes we have an array which only contains 2 elements. We can just write manually, which is books 0 equal to 1 or books 1 equal to 2. This will be very simple. But when the size of the array increases into 1,000 or 1 million, you cannot write 1 million line to just assign the value or initialize the array, right? Therefore, we need a loop structure. Now let's come to the basic structure of the loops. First, we should write the condition for the loops. The conditions will contain 3 parts. The first part is the starting point of our loop. I represent for the index, and in most cases, the I will start from 0. And the second part is the ending point of the array. In most cases, it will ending at the end of this array. I don't recommend you write 10 right here. Sometimes the length of the array will change. So we can write as books.length. Books.length is the size of the books, and right here it is 10. And the third part of this array is the looping execution condition, which means that in each time of the loop, we will just add 1 to the index, which means that in all the loops, each time we will add 1 to the index, we will count from 0 to 1 to 2, and then to go into the last element, which is 9. There is a very important thing I need to remind you is that different from mathematics, computer science is pretty different. For computer science, we will count everything from 0. So which means that if an array has 10 elements, we will count from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 and then to the n minus 1. N represents for the number of elements within the array, which is 9 in our book's array. We will count from 0 to 9. In total, there are 10 elements. Okay. For our books array, we want to just assign 10 randomly selected number into this array. So we should write some and call some functions to generate a random number, which is between 10 to 99. I will introduce the functionality of this line of the code. We have first the method random function. This function will return a value which is from 0 to 1. Once we call this function, it will generate and return a value which is from 0 to 1. And we times this value by 90. And then it will from 0 to 90, right? Master floor function will just convert this value into an integer. And this integer will be the closest to this number, and also it should be smaller than this number, which means that we have a number which is 95.7, and if we call this function, yeah, it will just return 95, because 95 is the closest integer to 95.7, and also it should be smaller than this. This is the usage of master floor, and then we add this number by 10. So master random will be 0 from 1 times 90 will be 0 from 90, and if we use master floor, it will be 0 to 89, and we add by 10, it should be 10 to 99. Then we assign the randomly generated number into the ith element of the books. This is the method of creating an array. We have covered this up. Now we just come into the functions. The basic structure of JavaScript functions is like this. We first have the keyword function. Then we have the function name. Our first task is to print the array values in order. Our function name is print array. We also have an inputs or parameters as a. This is the basic structure of the JavaScript functions. Okay. This is a quick review because we have covered up this. Now let's write the loops for printing the array values in order. We can have the loops keyword as 4. And then we should have the first part is I equal to 0, which means that our index should start from 0, and I is smaller than a.length. Because our input array is a, so it should be a.length, and it should be I plus. And in each loop, what we need to execute is just write the number into our web page. It should be document right, and the value should be a high. And because we will just print the values one by one, so we should add the space after the value. This is the function which contains a loop, and this loop will just traverse 10 elements within our array and then print them one by one in order. Now we can just open with live server. The problems is that we didn't call this function. So now we should call this function here. Call print array with books and argument. So it should be print array, and our input is books. And the second is print array as names as inputs. Now go back. You can see we have traversing books only in order from 30 to 74, and we traversing the names array in order, which is from Joy to Paul. Okay, this is our first task. Let's come into the second task is to traverse the array in reverse order. And the code of this function is print reverse. Now let's imagine one thing. In the common order from 0 to 9, we just start from 0 to the a.length, and then we add 1 each time. So the traverse order is pretty simple, which means that we should start from the last element, then going to 0, then minus 1 each time. So it should be for variable I equal to a.length minus 1. You should be very careful right here. It should be a.length minus 1 rather than a.length, because we have talked that the last element of the array should be n minus 1 rather than n. So it should be I larger or equal to 0, and then I minus minus, which means that for each time we just we will keep minus I by 1 every time. And document dot write AI and a space. Okay, this is the function of print reverse. We also need to call this function here, which is print reverse, and then books. Print reverse names. Okay, let's come back. You can see we have traversing books only in reverse order. From the last element, it should be 11 to the first element, which is 47, and also from Paul to Joy in reversing order. Cool. Let's come to the third task, which is find the average of array values. We should assign to the variable average the result of calling find the average with books as the arguments. Okay. So now we also need to write this function, which is find average. So please imagine how you calculate the average. The process is like this. We should have first is the average, right? And we should loop this array. We should traverse all the elements within this array, and then add each element in with this average one by one, and then we just divide the average by the length of this array. So the things will be like this: for variable I equal to 0, I smaller than a.length, then I plus plus. We should add up the average with this element. So it should be average equal to average plus AI. Then average should be equal to average divide average by a.length, right? And then please return this average. So this is a function of find average, which we first should have the we should first have the variable called average, and we add up all the elements together to this average, and then we divide it by a.s, which is the number of elements within this array, and then we return this value. Okay, so now we also need to call this function. The function is find average, right? And our inputs is books, because names are strings. So we cannot compute the average for some strings. So now we can going back. We can see the average of books on in array is 41. If you compute this, you will get the same result as this average result, which we compute by calling the function. Okay, next, the last job is to find where the largest number is in the books array. So we should have the function which is find largest index. Now we need to complete the find the largest index function. Okay, go to here. So let's imagine that if we want to find the largest index, first we should just initialize the variable largest index equal to 0, right? Now what we do is that every time we should compare each element to we also need another which is largest number, and we should have two variables. First is the largest index, second is the largest number. So every time we should traverse the elements within this array, then we should compare this element with the largest number. If our element is larger than the largest number, then we will update the largest number and also the largest index. The loops will be like this: I equal to 0, I smaller than a.length, I plus plus. If ai is greater than largest number, then we should update the largest index equal to I, and also update largest number equal to the current element, which is ai. And then we just return the largest index. Okay, this is function of find largest index. Now we can call this function where is the books, and so the largest number should be books where, and who should be names where, because they are in the same order. Okay, let's do a test. You can see the largest number of the books owned is 93. If you check the arrays, you can find 93 is the largest number of the books. And Joy owns the most books because 93 is the first, and also Joy is the first person. So Joy owns the most books. Okay. Our last task is printing bar graph by values in number arrays. We need a nested loop here. I think it's pretty hard to describe what is a bar graph. Let me show you an example. This is called bar graph. For example, if Joy owns 22 books, we will print 22 stars representing Joy owns 22 books. Mary owns 65 books. We will print 65 stars, representing Mary owns 65 books. This is called the bar graph. So how to do this? Now let's just write the function of the bar graph. We don't need to create a new function. We can just write here. First, let's look at our example. No matter what, we should first reverse the arrays of the names and books, right? So first we also have r equal to 0, I is smaller than it should be names.length, right? And I plus plus. So the first line should be the name. So it should be document, all right. It should be names, I, then plus, which is breaking line, right? So for the second line, we should first print the number, which is the number of the books. So it should be document.write books I plus a space, right? After it, we should print 22 stars, right? We should just print 22 stars. So it should be a loop. And we should start from the 0 to the 21, which represents that we should print 22 stars. We have another loop. Because we have the nested loop structure. So for the first level loop, the index is I. So we should use another index character to represent for the second level index, which should be j in most cases. So it should be j smaller than names. Books I minus 1. Because right now books I equal to 22, right? So the second level index j should be smaller than 22 minus 1, which is books I minus 1. And also j plus plus. And we should also write document.write, which is a star, and we just write 22 times. And lastly, we should also have a breaking line, right? Okay, we can see our result. Now we have printed the bar graph correctly, which is Joy. For example, Joy has 34 books. We print 34 stars for Joy, and we print or write 70 stars for Mary. So this is the nested structure. What I need to remind you is that the index for second level and first level loop should be different. First is I and second is j. This is very important. Okay, this is all for our recitation 9. Don't forget to just submit your attendance record. Bye.